Hello, this is John Speelman with the video version of my latest column. I'm actually recording this on Friday, September the 30th, but the column's on Sunday, October the 2nd, and I'm just going to check first that we are recording, and we are. Good. And Sunday, October the 2nd is my 66th birthday, so I officially become a pensioner in the UK. I have to say I'm not particularly delighted about this, but unless there could be a rewriting of the laws of physics, which is not really within my purview, then I think that's what's going to happen, isn't it? Right, so what I did was, I said, well, I've been being a little bit self-indulgent in these columns anyway, mainly with the titles and the introductions, not with the chess itself. I mean, it's just that I like having silly titles and things. And I thought, well, I've called this Codgerly self-indulgence. Codger's slang for an old person, really, in English anyway. And old bloke, I think, more than old person. And what I thought was that I would have a selection of my favourites. Well, I didn't really plan for this very much. I thought a fortnight ago, oh well, if it's on my birthday, then I ought to just indulge myself. And then I left it, and then I was flobbering, is the word I use personally, just lying around sort of thinking, shall I watch some television or something, or do something, or do a crossword or a killer Sudoku or something. And I didn't have much energy. It was on Wednesday, so a couple of days ago, and I started thinking, what shall I actually do in this column? And I got some reasonable stuff. So what I've got is 3 games, one of them my own hack, just 3 favourite games off the top of my head. There are lots and lots of others I could have chosen. 3 studies, a couple by Nikolai Grigoriev, which are just sublimely simple but beautiful, and I've got a pawn ending of my own, which, you know, is not just something I'm proud of doing, but I mean not inordinately. And then I've got a couple of construction tasks to end. I could have had some helpmates if I could have rounded them up, because I like basically helpmates and construction tasks. I'm not particularly good at solving sort of mates in 3 or something. I've never gone into the problem solving or anything like that. Excuse me, I'm going to blow my nose, in fact, I'm sorry. So, let's start then. And I was originally, this is the database, I was originally going to use the great game Karpov-Spassky, the wonderful game in which he plays lots of little moves. It was Leningrad, I think, 1974, and wins. But then when I looked, I'd actually used it here in July, which seems a bit too recent. So I've got a different Karpov game. Karpov is, well, certainly was, perhaps the best middle game player of all time. Not sort of mad attack or anything, just putting his pieces in the right squares. Absolutely fantastic at just knowing how to coordinate his pieces and put little bits of pressure on his opponent and stuff and just keep everything together. Absolutely fantastic. I guess maybe Capablanca was like that as well. Just a complete innate understanding of where the chess pieces belong. So, but this game is more violent. It's a game with Viktor Korchnoi during their candidates' final match in 1974. So this was after Spassky had lost to Fischer. Was it this candidates' final even? I'm not sure. I ought to know, but my chess history isn't great. But I have to think about it. But he played Korchnoi in a candidates match, and he won. And this was the second game, I believe. Game 2. This was in Moscow, actually. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful game. It's a dragon. Yugoslav attack. I don't know, I'm not sure why they don't play h5 first, but I mean, I ought to know. I don't play the dragon, actually, or against the dragon. Anyway, nowadays they normally play h5, partly because of this game. And there are whole books on that as well. That was topical during the excuse me, Kasparov-Anand match where I was the second in New York at the top of the Twin Towers that no longer exist. And we had to send off as quickly as possible. We were told, well, Jonathan Mestel told me, oh, there's a book on the dragon, just on this variation, H4, H5, which we didn't know about because we hadn't prepared for the dragon, because Kasparov had never played it before. It was a brilliant switch when he switched from the Najdorf to the dragon. Really very, very good match play. And yeah, we had to get this book and, post haste. Anyway, who was it by? Was it Soltis, was it maybe? Anyway, so this was the main line at the time. White has sacrificed a pawn to open the H file. And now they used to go bishop h6, and what happened was bishop h6, knight takes e4 was the move, queen e3, rook takes c3 takes, knight back to f6, and black has a decentish position. He's the exchange down, but if he can stop mate, then he's doing okay, and the main line's supposed to go like this. You have to go rook g8, so you're ready to play rook g7. And there's a famous game, Nun Ljubojevic, for around about that time. When was Nun Ljubojevic? That was actually much later, in fact. But so maybe I'm getting my lines crossed, but I think this was already known that this was a way to play. And Ljubojevic won this one, in fact, as black. Okay, so the idea is, instead Karpov played this novelty, knight d2. I'm not sure whose it was. Maybe it was Simeon Foreman. Somebody can, if there are no comments, you can email me maybe with the or send a comment to Chessbase. I ought to know. I mean, Igor Zaitsev was later Karpov's second, but he wasn't a second until the late 70s, and this was the early 70s. Foreman, I think, was Karpov's second at the time. And the point of knight d2 is purely to stop rook takes c3, to make to nullify rook takes c3. Some more moves. I mean, this is a line. The idea here is that you play e5 to open the d file so you can play g5 and win a piece. But this is actually a known position, very, very complicated. And then I think the engines discovered this move and say that white is better. Well, I mean, it may very well be true, but obviously the boys at this time had no idea of this. Karpov will have looked at some other lines, and I mean, queen a5 is perhaps the most natural. So bishop h6, you can try bishop h8, but he didn't. And now rook d3, which again stops possibly a double exchange sacrifice on c3 to leave white's position really rotten. And here bishop e6 was the right move, but Codgerly made a mistake. He played rook to there, which seems to stop g5 and seems to be okay, but is actually a losing move. Now the thing about this position is that the knight on f6 is the defender which keeps black's position together. And what happened is that Karpov now played the beautiful move g5. If you don't take it, then this is pretty grim, I think. Rook takes g5, you would have rook d5, and you'd get all your boys in too quickly. If you don't, then there's knight takes knight. So he had to take it, but now the rook has gone across the critical square d5. So after rook d5, you force the knight to take, because rook takes, knight takes is just. Sorry, you force the rook to take, and then the knight gets to d5. That's the point. And so you've actually managed to get your knight to d5, which is the big deal. So you're threatening probably just to bring up one more piece and to win. You're not threatening mate yet because the king can run to e7. But the guy went rook e8, knight f4, bringing up another piece, bishop c6. Now the thing is, if you go knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, knight h5, which looks like a good idea, there's queen g5 check and you get to some sort of ending. But now Karpov plays the second interference. He plays the lovely move e5, which blocks the fifth rank. And now if pawn takes pawn, you can go knight takes knight, knight h5, and mate very shortly afterwards. So he had to go bishop takes, you take, and now white can actually win with checks. You mustn't go knight takes bishop, or you mustn't do that because there's rook e1 check. But by giving checks, it's over, because now if king e7 is the only move, takes. If queen takes, there's rook e1 check. If king f8, king d7, there's knight f6 check. You have to defend against d1, remember. And if king d8, there's queen f6 check, and white has a move to defend against the mate threat. So an absolutely beautiful game by Karpov. Brilliant attacking game. Maybe not even that typical, but lovely. So the next one I've got, my favourites, is the first serious chess book I ever got. My mum got me in 1962 or 3 when I was 6 or 7. Probably when I was 6, actually. I learnt when I was 6 and a bit. And it was a shop in Edgware Road in London. And she got me this chess book. It happened to be Bob Wade's account of the 1963 World Championship match. Actually, I had to be 7. Sorry, I had to be 7 because it was the 63 match. Yep. So I'm going to actually change that in here. Just say when I was right. So I said something about the Karpov-Spassky when I was 7. I think I won't say 6 or 7. 7 or 8. When I was 7. Okay, because of the match was in 63, and so I had this book of this incredible match in which Petrosin defeated Botvinnik, and I wouldn't have understood very much of it at the time. Obviously, kids were nothing like they are now, so I was probably a 100 player. I don't know, something like that. 100 goes to what is 100? You multiply by 6, don't you? Multiply by 8 and add 600, so that'd be 1400 maybe. That's right. 200 is 2200. Yep. That's the old English ratings which we used to have. And but anyway, I had this book, and this was the first game where Petrosin ever beat Botvinnik. He lost like a baby in the first game as white because he was so nervous. But he... So here, obviously c5 is a move, but your man played takes, c5, d5, e6. Takes here. And apparently Petrosin said to his trainer, who was his trainer? Saying to his second, Igor Boleslavsky. Sorry, I misspelled Igor Boleslavsky. We'll correct that as well, because I think Igor might as well be properly spelt. That Alto, isn't it? That if he got this position, he'd win it, and he did. This is a. Oh, have I just done that? Lost it. Sorry. Control C. Control V. Control R. I went control. I went control S rather than control R, didn't I? And yeah, we'll remove that second lot of that and go back again. Right, so anyway, Petrosian said that if he reached this position he would win it, and he did. I mean, knight d5 is interesting, and the engine says bishop d2. This is more a spectacle, really, than a game I want to analyse moment by moment. The knight is lovely on here. I think he was hoping now that after a3 he'd be able to get knight to d5 to f6 in. But Petrosian started to take control of the king of the queen side. And somewhere around about here, I think he should have gone king f7 or something. Somewhere around about here, Petrosian started to take more control. I think c4 wasn't a great move. He had this idea of using the c-pawn. And somewhere around about here, he might have played bishop takes and g5. Tried to get in moves to destabilise the king side, so it wasn't so easy for white to play the rook ending. What actually happened was this happened. Rook d2 doesn't particularly help. You just play king b3, threatening rook takes rook and king c2. Obviously, you can't take it immediately. And here he really should have taken this knight. He really needed to take the knight by now. But then it went there. And this position is pretty disastrous. You're threatening rook to c7 check with an enormous attack. And then it went there. And now you can't play rook h5, of course, because of king e5. Sorry, because of knight f6 check, excuse me. To stop king e5, because of knight f6 check. So he played some moves and the king got in. And this, I think, almost here was the adjourned position. I think it was on Mastermind or something, somebody did the World Championships and they said where was the king in the adjourned position. Well, I wouldn't have known whether it was f7 or g7 because I knew it went to those two squares. But this is the iconic adjourned position of Game 5 of that World Championship match. And very bad things happened to Botvinnik. He tried to fight. It's an enormous attack with the king and the knight. And here he resigned, actually, I think, because basically if you go h6, knight e4, h5, sorry, h6, knight e6, h5, you can swap everybody and play f4 at the end, then you just win. You have to go f4 to stop g5, of course. So if you go h6, knight to there, take, f4, stops the passed pawn, and then white wins. And if h5, you can just take on g6. So a brilliant game by Petrosian, really brilliant game. Okay, Botvinnik resigned quite early, but he knew he was going to lose and he couldn't bear it anymore. So, I don't know, maybe you should move your king, actually, and after knight takes, try rook d2 or something, but I can quite believe that if you stared at this over the board, if you just do this quickly, you think, oh, well, maybe you could fight a bit, but probably completely untrue. So I'm just adding another variation. This is my king to there, takes here, knight here. Sorry, wrong knight. This knight. And promote variation. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, and if here, I guess you should go e4. There is this line here, here, check, here, here, and that's the end of that. So it's that critical by now. It's that horrific. So brilliant game by Petrosian. Well, I've indulged myself with one of my own games. Unfortunately, it's also against Victor Korchnoi. It's just a good hack. I said when I played Victor, basically, he was I mean, I'm pretty good at endings maybe, but he was just better than me at that. So if he got the queens off the board nice and early, then he often tortured me and killed me. But excuse me, if I was able to keep the queens on and to start hacking, then he didn't like it. He really didn't like it when I caused too much confusion. And I'm going to turn this round. I haven't actually played through it recently, so I may slightly lose the plot at some point. I thought he'd gone c4, but okay. a4, not a great move probably. I mean, a6 is the main line, but I mean, yeah, okay. We played these moves. And I played d5. This position often happens without a6, a4. The difference, black controls b5, but the b6 square may become weak. So it's not that clear. Anyway, we played these moves. I mean, if you stuck it in an engine, who knows, they might say bishop d3 was really good for white. For instance, I mean, I know in some positions it is. And white just goes bishop d3 and starts playing h4 and hacking. Ignores more or less everything else that's going on, and black gets kicked in. Let me just ask. I'm going to add Kibitzer this one for a moment. I think it'll say bishop d3 and it'll say clear advantage. And it says 0.78. Okay. Doesn't matter. I mean, I just wanted to... That was my impression of what it would say, and I'm right, in fact, in this case. Come on, go away. Let's have some notation. Right. He took it and went here, and I went c5, which is the point. And you can go d5 as well, but okay, he took. I went queen c7, queen d5. Quite a clever move, really. h6 takes rook to here. And I think I should have taken an e5 or something. Unfortunately, I did something which loses. I went here, and I took, and I thought, this is nice. I'm threatening queen a5 check. But I totally missed, and Victor totally missed, the move queen c4, which I was in Brussels with John Nunn. We were at the first World Cup tournament, the Swift tournament. I think, was it called Swift? Or was it the Brussels World Cup? And I just missed queen c4. I was showing it to John rather proudly at dinner. He said, what about queen c4? And I thought, Gurk, this is annoying. Because queen c4 basically destroys my position entirely. Okay, most of my best games are unsound, unfortunately. I have a habit of playing well after giving my opponents a chance at some point. So that would have been horrible, but he went there. Check, here, knight c6. I'm not defending anything anymore. I'm on the warpath. He takes, I go here. And, well, it's dangerous. I've got knight b4 happening. You know, who knows? He went f4 to defend. I think I've also got knight e5, of course, so he needs to defend this pawn, really. Knight to there, queen to there. So now I've got to be careful. Basically, his bishop on e3 is keeping his position faintly intact. So I went knight d5 now. And I want to take his bishop, and then I'm assuming I'll get lots of checks at worst. I must have been calculating enormous numbers of variations here. Bishop d2. If he goes queen takes... This would have been a reasonable way to play, actually. But I think I have some strong move now. That's right, I have bishop b5 at the end of this. If I didn't have bishop b5, then this would be very unclear. But after bishop b5, obviously, black is better. Would have been quite a sensible thing to do. He went bishop d2, and I went bishop d3 check. And pretty obviously you can't take that. So his king has to go back, and I take in c5. And it's still a complete mess, because now he goes f5, and he's threatening... Well, he's going to attack me. But on the other hand, he isn't mating me in one move. He's mating me in two moves on the king's side, if you can put it that way. Well, I would put it that way. And I calculated a lot. I think I may have seen the end of this game at this point, possibly, because I can calculate when I want to a long way. And I played knight e3. He took and went here. And now I still have to defend myself because he's threatening knight takes bishop mate. I can't remember. I've got this in my book, and it'll say how far I calculated. But there's this move, which defends against mate and opens the line for the queen and prepares queen e5 check. So he takes, and now I start giving check, and luckily it all works out. Check, king to there. If he goes king d1, I go queen e2 check, rook c8 check, and queen c2 mate. Check here. And it's still not that obvious how you do this. But remember, he isn't threatening check, which is pretty important in a position like this. So I went here. He can't play king d1 because of knight e3 check when I win the house, the garden, and, well, whatever else is available. So he had to go g3, but that creates another possibility. Here I'm threatening queen g2 mate. The only move to fight is rook h2, but then I can change to a white square attack. He actually resigned here. If rook h2, I take it. I take this and I give check. If he goes king h1, I can go knight g3 check. Queen takes, rook takes, king back, and I have little mill. And I can take his bishop at the end, or I can do whatever I like. I can end up playing rook takes f7 and be a rook and a bishop up. Or if he goes to f1, then I have knight to e3 check and bishop takes queen. And again I end up with far too many pieces. So this is one of my favourite attacking games. It's not sound, unfortunately. It can't be helped. They never are quite sound, my games, or they very seldom are. Well, whose games are? Maybe Kasparov and Karpov and, I don't know, Fischer. The absolute best players ever were able to play sound games sometimes. Maybe even some of Mishatal's games were sound from time to time. But I enjoyed it very much, obviously. And it was, you know, since I often lost fairly badly to Victor, this was certainly better than that. Right, I've then got 3 studies. 2 by Nikolai Grigoriev. He was a Russian and then Soviet composer, and I looked him up. I didn't know he'd been picked up by the NKVD, the predecessor of the KGB, in 37 or 38, when there was basically a terror, wasn't there? And died as a result, which I was very sad to hear. But he was one of the great study composers of all time, and I just love his studies. And the first one, this is white to play. I'm going to put this on replay training, I think. This is white to play and draw, and it's a study that I first saw at the Glawny Cup, which is the home country's tournament, teams tournament for juniors. Lots and lots of people have come through this, of course. And Jonathan Mestel showed it to the English team. And we just couldn't do it because there were too many of us and too many hands. So you have to go first. You have to stop the B pawn and then try to stop the H pawn. And the first thing is that black now goes to G6. Because if he goes to G7, you just go king takes pawn, king takes knight, king C4, D5. And iconically, you could actually go king D5 to get in the square. Because that is sort of the square. But anyway, obviously king d3 is what you play. So black has to go here. Then you start running. You haven't got time to take on b4. If you take on b4, h5, knight d7, h4, knight c5, h3, knight d3, h2, knight f2, and when you count, white is a move short. And we counted many times in the half hour that we were doing this, and we didn't see. So knight d7, h5. Now white has to find a path back, and I'm going to give you, have a look first, and maybe stop this if you'd like to try to solve this, and then I will give you a big hint. So, the big hint is, where would you like the white knight to be if black got an h2 with his king still an f5? And the answer is f1. So let me first try if white plays this move. h3 now draws because the knight can stop the pawn on the 6th rank. This is very well known. But you play king e4 to stop him. I think king g4 works actually as well, but you wouldn't play it. Here, here, here is the best you can do, and now you just go here, and this knight just isn't getting back. So, but the solution is the beautiful knight c5, h4, knight b3, not knight d3, which is the natural move because then you win by a tempo. But knight b3, draw. Very nice study. Very simple. There's a story that the knight's path spells out a G for Grigoriev, but that's a bit, well, even if it's true, that wasn't his motivation of making the study, I don't think. Beautiful study. Another one by Grigoriev. I couldn't find this, sorry, this is the wrong way around actually. I couldn't find this for a while because I thought the white king started in g5. But in fact it starts in g6. You have to stop the c-pawn, so you have to go here. If c5 you can just go and take it. And now the first difficult move. You maybe saw it there. Black, if he goes king d3, king d5, king c3, king c5, what just wins. So black has to lose a tempo with the clever c6. Now, I should have given the other line. If king, is it in the notation? Yeah, if, sorry, it should be here. If king to here, king to here, king takes pawn, king here. So king d6 is question mark. So you have to go a4. Have to go king d3. Right. So we get to this position. By the way, I'm going to just replace them. I assume I've got the notation still. So now white has to find the only winning move. So a normal move would be something like queen a3 check, king d2. But then queen b2, king d1 is okay actually. Because if you bring the king in, pawn equals queen will hit the queen. And if you go queen a3 check, king d2, queen a2, then king d1 loses because white brings his king down to d3. But black has king c3, which strangely happens to draw. So the only winning move, have a look and then I will give you the first move and then you can find the rest. So the first move is queen d5 check is the only winning move. So the main line goes king e2, but now you can go queen a2 and you can't go to c3. So king d1, king d4, pawn equals queen, king d3. There's king c3, and then white has an immediate win, you just have to see it, which is queen d4, king to there, queen a1. And the last one is king e3, sorry. And then you have to find the winning move, which is still not that easy. I mean, if you should see it eventually, but I've shown this to people and they've taken a minute or so, or a couple of minutes to see it. Sort of semi-decent players, you know, just if you see it or not. The answer is queen to there, king to there, queen to there. Obviously, if pawn equals queen, queen to there. So that's also a beautiful, very, very minimalist study. I just like simplicity. I said I like either simplicity or complete chaos. So the game with Victor, my game with Victor was total chaos, and I like that as well. But not so much in between. Then I've got one of my studies. This is a study by me. And the point is that if white, it's a pawn ending, and the obvious move is king e5, but if you count it out, then it turns out that king e5, king d7, king f6, king c6, maybe play h4 first, king b5, h5, king takes pawn, king c7, b5, king takes pawn b4, h6, b3, and what black queen's first. I know you're supposed to count, but I never do. So you can't win like that, and instead you go towards the king side. So the question is what you do now. And the position, have a think, and I'll give you a moment to think about it. And the thing is that because the pawn's an h7, black doesn't have that square. And so you go here. And this takes the opposition, because if black could play king h7, he'd be fine, but it's illegal. So he goes there first. Now if you go king e4, king d7, you draw, because you can't get to the pawn via g6. But now you go this way. And you've got the same position, but the pawn's an h4 rather than h3. And now we have the denouement. Where does the king go? Mustn't go to g6, because then the black pawn and queen would check. Mustn't go to g8, because that would block the 8th rank, so you go to there. So there we are. Something clean and quite simple in some ways, but you have to see it. And just an illustration of, well, an illustration actually of that these things work because the square, the black king doesn't have a square. And I just gave, this is a little example why triangulation works. And I wanted to say that if black could play king e7 now, or indeed king g7, he would draw. King g7 would be fine as well, because king e5, king f8, or king f5, king f7. King e7, ditto. King e5, king f8, or king f5, king f7. But because you don't have that square, now it's black to move. You've done a little triangle. And there is a choice of that, or of king to there, king to there. So that's the well-known triangulation. And the reason it works is, the point I'm making, is because the black king's options are restricted. If he could go to e7, then white couldn't help maneuver him. Okay, you need the pawn on f6 anyway, but it is a function of the pawn that it controls a square. And there are other studies where that happens as well, lots. There's one by Mattison, actually. Now, the next one, look away for a second if you want to solve this. And I'm going to put it here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have to, please look away again, because I'm going to play through to the final position. So this is a task, and the question is, how can you reach this position after black's fourth move? It's not really a favourite of mine, but it's something, it's just an intro to the next one. And the obvious thing is e4, e6, bishop b5, I don't know, a6, bishop takes pawn check, king e7, but it just doesn't work. And eventually you find out, or you try to go e3 and e4 or something, eventually you discover that the only way to do this is to play king e7. Which is a nice trick, but it's the sort of thing that happens in these proof games. Okay, and the last thing I've given you, I haven't put it in the database. I'll refer you to here. Right. Now then. So, the last example, the final example, was discovered by the French-Canadian mathematician and computer scientist Francois Labelle, from the output of his program. It is construct a game ending in 7 rook c7 checkmate with the black king on d7. Now note that this is not rook takes c7, but rook to c7. This is extremely difficult and took me a whole week to solve. Note that it is rook c7 mate, not rook c7, not rook takes c7 mate. There are several very slight different versions. versions, but there are different exact move orders possible, but the final position almost unique. Right, so there are several very slightly different exact sequences, I suppose is what I mean, isn't it? Exact sequences possible. But the final position is almost unique. There's one piece that can be on some different squares, but I mean, basically, the sequence is sufficiently. I said it took me a week to do this, and I was actually on a bus going. I live in northwest London, West Hampstead. I was taking a 113 bus. During lockdown, I had to go and get some medicine, in fact, from Edgware. And I was on the top of this bus, sitting there in my mask, I suppose. God help us. And suddenly the penny dropped. And I thought, my God, that's fantastic. It is a glorious puzzle. Anyway, I'm going to leave the solution for a fortnight. But if you want to find it with my comments, then if you look for column 128, which is called something like, let me just open it. It's called recent documents. I've got a column list. Where's my column list? Yeah, is that a column list? No, that's not what I want, is it? File open. Sorry. Here we are. Agony columns. Here we are. Number 128 is called Parking the Prelate and the Tower of Time and Motion. And the bit that's relevant is the Tower of Time and Motion. This is my complete list of my columns, 179 of them. And so you can, if you can't bear to wait, or you could go to Francois Labelle's page and you'd probably find it. But easier to go to use a search engine and find column 128, and it will give you the solution. But I urge you to spend, if you like things like this, if you don't, then obviously ignore me entirely. But if you do like them, then spend a little while at least trying to do it, because the solution is absolutely stunning. Utterly stunning. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in a chessboard, even if nothing to do with the normal game of chess. Okay, right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my birthday selection, and I will be back presumably on the 16th of October, it being the second when this comes out. And cheers. Right.